Hello, and welcome to Covert Castaway. I'm Holly.
Je suis Stéphane.
Join us as we share what we learn and how we're making the transition to liveaboard cruising. So today's podcast, we're going to talk about stuff and all of the stuff you do or don't need on a boat, just based on our experience. What do you think of this topic?
I think it's a good one.
Yeah, me too.
Moving on a boat is a great opportunity to revisit your shit.
Get rid of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We get a lot of questions to our sailingowen@gmail.com about, moving onto a boat. What should you pack? And just obviously this has to do with, moving onto a boat to live for the purpose of living aboard. This isn't a charter, topic so much as like what you think you really need for a boat. So we thought this sort of, kept to its own topic in terms of a podcast and wanted to spend some time on it. So yeah, I mean, we just want to share our experience on what we've done to downsize and what we learned after the first couple seasons living on a boat.
Yeah. And what we're doing doesn't have to be right. It's just kind of what the conclusions we came to and realize that what we naturally are coming to is also what we hear, that what happens naturally with cruisers that are buying second boat, third boat. So yeah, maybe if you hear that, then you can fast forward the first boat, second boat, and equip your boat and bring stuff on it as if it was your third boat.
Yeah. So that's right. So, we sort of were talking to some people about this, and it seems like the more boats people have, go from boat to boat, the less stuff they have, or the lighter they prefer to keep it. So
both in options and personal stuff they bring on board.
Right. Yeah. And so on this opportunity piece, you can kind of take a whole new perspective. I think it's easy to, at least it was for us when we were still thinking about a boat and what we wanted to have on the boat. We were thinking of it in terms of how we were currently living our life and what we thought we would need to sort of transfer that life we were living onto living on a boat. So that's what we did the first time on our first boat. And so, now we're kind of looking at it the opposite angle, which we'll get to. But just wanted to kind of talk through that. The other thing is, we've been living sort of more nomadically, I would say, over this past year between boats because we're traveling and moving around and going back and forth. And so we've been living out of a suitcase or two. Yeah,
that was true when we traveled inland in Turkey. Then we came back with just minimal stuff back home in Tahoe. And then we traveled to Guadeloupe, to France, and we basically have a couple bags.
Yeah.
And still...
We're moving around, yeah.
Still, we had probably too much.
Yeah. And
we learned from that, too.
We thought, we're packing so light. We only have, a duffel bag and a backpack or whatever. And then, you're schlepping all of this stuff from Airbnb to hotel to wherever. And still, you're not using, at least I wasn't using even half of what was in the bag. But then when you're packing, you're like, I definitely need this. And what you actually use is completely different. And it's such an interesting phenomenon to me, like how we, even with very little stuff, we still only use half of what we have.
Yeah, I think it's not something like you say, okay, I'm going to decide to minimize,
no,
and then you get it right. It's going to be a learning process.
Yeah.
And everywhere you go, you're like, okay, you have to be analytical about it and be, okay, I haven't used that.
Yeah.
So next time I should not bring it.
And it's literally blood, sweat, and tears to schlep these bags around, whether it's on the trains or at the airport or public transportation when you're trying to get somewhere. We had a car when we were in Europe, but I couldn't imagine how we would even get on a taxi or in a Uber if they had it. Like, how would you even carry that stuff around?
Granted that we brought some stuff that we had in storage in my parents' house with the idea that we would leave it in La Grande Motte, but we ended up bringing it back to my parents.
But even if you take those things out of it, it's still a pain. Like, someone is holding the parking spot while the other person, comes around, and it's just a big headache. So the less stuff you have, just generally, the better, and the more portable you can become.
Yeah. And it's, and there's nothing I can think of, like, you'll be like, oh, I don't have this particular clothes or this particular
Every once in a while, you're like, oh, I wish I had this pair of shoes to go with this. And then you realize you don't really need it. Yeah, I know. It's so true.
It doesn't matter. People don't look at it.
Yeah. So let's start way back when we decided to downsize. And that might be where a lot of people are coming from is, maybe they're living in a house and are at that phase of life where their kids have moved out and they're downsizing and moving on to a boat. That's kind of a general milestone. Not everybody, but let's just start there. So when we downsized, we had lived in our house. I'd lived there for 20 years. And we just accumulated so much stuff that you don't even realize. So we downsized from that. We moved into...
we accumulated... It was a big house. Mm-hmm. It didn't look like... Because none of us are like...
No, it wasn't cluttered.
No,
it wasn't cluttered at all. And I took pride in the fact that I got rid of stuff and I didn't have that much stuff. But once you unpack the attic and the garage and the shed and everything else, you end up with like... in cupboards and everything. It's like the more space you have, the more you put in it. And you open up the cupboard and you go, oh, there's not very much in there. But when you unpack everything, it's actually a lot. Mm-hmm. So we downsized from that, and we had, what was it? We had like, we sold some stuff online, and then we sort of decided to have a garage sale or a sidewalk sale or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And so we started getting rid of stuff, and then the next day it was like free, and then the day after that it was like paying someone to come and take the rest of the dump. Yeah. And then we donated a whole car full of stuff. It seemed like that first go round.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
seeing it go, we're like, oh, now we have nothing.
Yeah. And and just shoes. So I had a little shoe closet, that I felt like, okay, this was like the minimum set of shoes. I ended up donating like 30 pairs of shoes, and I didn't think I had that many shoes. So, you don't know how much you have until you literally start counting, the stuff. And all the stuff in the bathroom and just products that are, half full bottles, that you don't want to throw away or whatever. Everybody can probably relate. So anyway, we got rid of all that, and we said, now we're like really downsized. We don't have anything barely. And we moved into a little apartment. And what happened?
Which was still like a 3-bedroom, it's not that small.
Well, all the rooms were small. The footprint was small. It was 3 bedrooms, but it was small, yeah.
And then whatever we had left, we thought was minimally stuff, suddenly like filled up that new little house.
Not only that, but the garage was full too, to that house. And so we thought we were good until we got into a smaller space.
So basically first round was a fail.
No, we got rid of 3/4 of our stuff. So we took 1/4 of the stuff, we put it into this little apartment, and we picked an apartment smaller than other apartments we looked at because we knew eventually we'd be living on a boat, and we were like, oh, what would that be like? So we actually on purpose wanted a small little kitchen with only a couple cupboards and that sort of thing. And it was still...
So basically it was iteration number 1.
Yeah, that was the first iteration. And you get attached to stuff. You're like, oh, this is my favorite mixer. This is my favorite thing. You don't get too attached to it. Well, you had books and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, but I gave away a lot.
Yeah.
I brought some on the boat, and now they stayed on the boat. And so...
Yeah.
Ultimately, you just get rid of stuff.
Yeah. So whatever your form of sort of storage is, whether you have a place to go back to, in our case, we have a house that in the mountains that we. So that was
iteration number 2.
Right.
Yeah. So what happened is kind of in the midst of like COVID and stuff. So we rushed to move physically here. And then we donated
and got rid of our lease.
We basically, it was trash day. The next day, you could dump everything in the street. That was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we got rid of it.
And we moved to Tahoe with one car full of stuff.
One car full of stuff, yeah.
So that was like iteration number 2.
Yeah. I mean, we brought up a couple boxes of like family photos and, you know, the box of Christmas ornaments you can't part with. You know, obviously we kept those and we have those in our... But so whatever your form of like storage is, so maybe you have a place where you're still living, maybe you have a storage facility, maybe you have a basement somewhere, you know, there are things that you just don't want to part with. Some people sell everything, but there's still, we always hear, you know, you still have things that you want to keep somewhere. So from this point, this is where I get a lot of the emails is, okay, so should we buy everything in the US and put it in a container and ship it? And the cost of shipping for these containers has skyrocketed. I think when we were looking at it, it was like $5,000 or something like that, and took months. I mean, it wasn't like a easy process. And it was
complicated. Like some companies that used to do these from door to door, like stopped doing it. But now is the cost of shipping.
Yeah, it's...
And then if you have a small container that they bring at home, you'll fill it up.
Yeah.
So like you're starting on the wrong foot.
Well, I mean... based on our opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, so some people thought of everything they could possibly have on the boat and they shipped it on a container. It shows up, it goes through customs, they unpack it, you know, through all the logistics of getting it. They move onto their boat and their boat is completely set up and full. And so that's one way to do it.
There's a million ways of doing it. What we're sharing is what we think for us, like what we're slowly through this iteration process or learning. And what so seems to be in line with what we hear.
And so what we did is we took 2 duffel bags, 2 backpacks, and 2 carry-ons or something like that. We didn't have that much stuff. And it was like the stuff we brought from like our clothes basically and our toothbrushes and some things like this, you know, like some personal items. You know, our Fally jackets that we liked, that sort of thing. And then everything else we bought where the boat was
locally
in La Rochelle. So, depending on where you're getting your boat built, if you're picking your boat up in one of these, you know, towns that is just builds boats and is full of marina products, anything you could possibly imagine, you can buy. And just in doing the math and eyeballing it, it seemed like some of the products were actually less than they were in the U.S., price for price, even with currency exchange. Some were more, some were less, but at the end of the day, it all sort of evened out even with currency exchange. So I think people are concerned about, you know, the currency exchange and the VAT tax and stuff, which may have been a bit more. But anything major that you put on a boat for temporary export is actually VAT free. So there's ways to account for that.
I mean, when you take into account the cost of shipping, especially today, I mean, that's a lot of stuff you can buy for that, and brand new stuff. So, and if you equip your boat with 220, like just, you know, there are not that many appliances and stuff, like just... Just best to buy it over there in 220 and be done with it. And you have like major chains in France, you know, like
Carrefour and
Leroy Merlin would be like for tools and stuff, would be the equivalent of Home Depot and stuff in the US. You have, obviously, you have IKEA, so everybody knows. All the sports, you know, like Decathlon. In Europe, it's everywhere.
It's like the best thing ever, Decathlon.
It's like super good quality products at like, you know, really competitive prices. So you can find some major chains and buy everything you need.
Yeah. And the stuff I like I said before, it seems much more affordable, especially in places like Decathlon. I can't even think of an equivalent from, you know, a store that's in the US. Maybe it would be like Target for sporting goods or something, like for every single sporting activity you can imagine, they have things for it. So that's really good. So people do it differently. That's how we did it. Other people show up at the dock with their bathing suits and step on the boat and then figure out, I mean, there's this super minimalist version of that probably, which is actually, I think, where we're at, you know, in terms of what we want to do, but we'll get to that in a minute. So let's start with setting up the boat. You know, I mean, we talked about this in previous podcasts, just things that we realized we didn't use that much, like the generator, the washing machine, the dive compressor, and more minimal use of the AC than we thought. Like when we used the AC, we definitely needed it, but I don't know if we needed all 6 units that we put on it, which was the only option.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we needed it, it was at the marina and we were in the salon. So that's where you needed it. And
which meant you were plugged to shore power and the generator. So it just meant we didn't use the generator as much as we thought we would either.
Yeah, and at Anchor, I mean, we really worked on kind of airflow, even putting like a fan over the hatch to kind of bring the cold air from outside to inside. And whenever we turned the air conditioning on, it was like for 30 minutes, half an hour to just cool things down. So yeah, so basically we definitely didn't need like 6 units.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah. And then with the washing machine, I think I mentioned before, we only could use it really when we were plugged into shore power. I think you could use it with the generator on, but we just never
We had
did.
an inverter that was like 2,000 watts, and it was a little too little. 3,000 would have worked, and so. But in any case, that was not even the issue. It's like by the time you just wash, I mean,
when you're at Anchor, you're just not wearing that many clothes, honestly. And then when we didn't even have to be at a marina. If you're just anchored out and you're going in for groceries, there's laundromats, there's laundry services. People will actually take it for you. They'll meet you, pick it up from wherever you are. They'll pick it up, and then you schedule kind of a meeting place and time, and they hand it back to you. And it's not that much.
And that's when you can add the towels and sheets and stuff. So it's like much easier than doing it yourself with your little machine. And so it comes back, it's all folded and stuff. And then the regular clothes, just in the shower. Your swim trunk, take a shower, wash it at the same time, reuse it the next day.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens.
Yeah. And before we move on to personal and household items, which is really kind of the meat of what this is about, we just want to touch on these big systems. And the one last thing was the dinghy. So, everybody has a different view on this. So we're just sharing ours. There's the nice center console, big, heavy dinghies, which are very nice. And, if you think of them like a car, but they're heavy and they're cumbersome to kind of take down and get back up if you're one person doing it. They're easier people think they're easier to drive because they have a steering wheel. But then to actually beaching them is difficult, which happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think the temptation is to say my dinghy is my car.
Right.
And I want the nicest car possible because that's where I'm going to move around. And so I think it's your car. It's the stuff that's going to bring you around, but you can have like a big American car and with like 4-wheel drive, like lots of space, heavy, or you can have like a European car.
Or a mini.
Just like very practical.
Or a mini, yeah.
Yeah, not even going to a mini, like just the European cars are smaller. Yeah. They're just for the usage that you need, and it's much easier to drive them around in parking lots and stuff. So it's like our philosophy is like, yeah, it's a car. We're not going electrical on the outboard, but we're going with just a small dinghy because we're not thinking of it as, okay, how much length do we have between the two hulls, as kind of the max dinghy you can get. We're not thinking of it as, one day or some days we might have 8 people, we want to be able to take everybody around. And we're thinking now,
day-to-day use.
80% of the time or more, it's going to be just the 2 of us, and that dinghy, small lighter dinghy, is going to be sufficient. And then that means we're not carrying that huge, heavy dinghy at the back of the boat all the time. And and if we need to beach it, then the 2 of us can do it.
Yeah, easily. And then it's easy and light and small, and even God forbid it gets stolen. You don't have like tons of costs. Obviously there's insurance and whatever, but it's just sort of, it's just simpler for us. So this is a topic, and I'm just speaking from my experience just to change topics here. I feel like when you move on to a boat, you kind of go through this mental transition where you want it's nesting. Right. It's like, I want to live in a nice little area. I want it to feel like a home. I don't want it to feel like some stripped out racing boat. that's like all practical, but no, like I don't feel like it's mine. I can't connect to it. And so, when we got on our boat, I was like, there has to be some comforts from home that I feel like, okay, this is my new space.
And I think also there was, every boat looks kind of the same.
Yeah.
So
you want to personalize it. Yeah.
Not make it feel like it's a boat, but more like kind of a home.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'll have to say, like, there are things that that are important to you that you should absolutely have. Like, to me, I wanted a nice espresso machine. And, that's just a part of my morning ritual. I enjoy having a good cup of coffee. That's important to me. So, there's that. Certainly there's other ways to do that more simply, but, so I do think it's important to kind of pick a few things that you really care about and have nice stuff. And then what we also did is, I care about things like the sheets and the towels and the blankets and these kinds of things. So all that stuff mattered to me. And it, to me, made it more like, okay, this is our little space, and this is we're all color coordinated, and I like it and stuff. But in hindsight, there's some different decisions I would have made. Like, for instance, a couple things I did do is just picking the right types of fabrics. So like microfiber dries quicker, which in moist environments for sheets is good because you can get them dried more quickly than 100% cotton sheets and stuff. So that was good. I got big cotton towels though. And later I ended up buying the Turkish towels that were thinner.
Yeah, better.
Yeah. But the other thing is I kind of wish I didn't buy so much in the beginning because we visited some really cool places, Greece and Turkey being two of them, where I would have wanted to buy stuff from there, to make part of the home. Like, oh, this would be nice to have, but I had this blanket. I have a blanket like this already from wherever it was I got it. Where I feel like it would have meant more had I bought it along the way. And stupid stuff, like, I don't know, like the oil and vinegar. Like Greece had these really cool oil and vinegar things that I was like, oh, I wish I, could do that. But I had bought this other one for like $5 or something somewhere else, so I didn't need it. So I don't know. I kind of felt like maybe it would have been good to buy less in the beginning, and then you pick up souvenirs and stuff that you want on your boat that are nice along the way that maybe you would have made different choices on.
Yeah, and it's a challenging process because, our philosophy was let's get everything ready on day one, so then we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And yes, there is some comfort into this. And you think like, hey, you're there, you're equipping your boat, so let's go and buy everything. But it takes a little bit of the fun and the adventure because you're going to visit those different countries. So that's definitely something. I mean, it was the same for like the tools and the spare parts. Like we equip it with the thinking like tomorrow we'll be in the French Polynesian island.
It won't have access to anything. Yeah.
And that was not the case. So obviously, if you move into some exotic remote places, then that's a whole different approach. But if you're going to spend a few years in the Med, then you have everything around.
Yeah.
And
it's more buy it as you need it. It seems like. I mean, maybe a basic set of tools, is good, but I think you have this period of time while you're sort of shaking your boat down the first couple of years and getting used to it. You can kind of grow into things. Yeah. There are certain things I wouldn't like the pressure washer thing. Like that was awesome having that for sure.
Yeah.
But that's a personal preference.
But that's something you're going to use regularly as part of like, preventive maintenance on your boat. But like, obviously if you're buying a boat that you're fixing, or if you have like, you're like the DIY guy who likes to do all kind of projects. So you're obviously going to bring more tools on board. But if you're buying a boat that is like fairly new, then, and you're not going to do like major projects, then you need the tools for like 80% of the jobs. And if there is a major issue, sure. I mean, it all depends also on budget, but there's a good chance that if you have the expertise is one thing. If you don't, then there's a good chance you might kind of hire somebody locally to fix the problem. So then they have their own tools, and then spare parts is the same thing. We bought spare parts for 4 years or something, and to keep in mind too, like tools, spare parts. I mean, stuff over time is going to age. So if you have a fairly new boat and you don't need the first few years, like all these tools and spare parts, then, you know, don't bring them on board.
Yeah.
And then just keep it like one set of spare parts, just have the basic tools.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, I mean, you don't want to rely on other cruisers, but it's
a nice way to meet people.
Not 100%, but I'm saying like you don't go with like nothing. And
Yeah.
I need
a screwdriver.
Yeah.
No.
But if you have your basic set of tools, then, you know, this is nice. You have this you're part of this community, and people are going to be happy to help you and
who was it? You had to replace the steering wheel brake or something, and we need some special part, and we're like, okay, who's going to have this claw thing, whatever. What was the name of that tool? I don't remember.
Oh, I don't even know like how it's called.
And so we were friends with Stephen and Kim, and we're like, hey, do you have this weird part? And he's like, oh yeah, I have one on my boat. You know, so it's kind of funny, some random tool.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to meet people. For sure. But that same that goes with tools kind of goes with galley stuff. You know, like I wanted to have the whole set of, you know, the nesting pots or whatever. I ended up using 2, full cutlery for like 12 people. And later I probably would have gotten different kinds that didn't show the water spots, because there's always, you know, calcium in the water or whatever at the marinas. So it was always looked like there were spots on them. I would have done something different. So there's stuff like this that you kind of learn that, you know, I kind of wish I had done the bare minimum and then just bought it as I needed it, I think. So you want to talk about like some other stuff like bikes, and that's another question we get. Like, would you buy bikes or, you know, scooters or whatever? Yeah.
So, I mean, the first, I think, question comes, it's like, oh, should I buy bikes or scooters? You know? And to us, it became logical that scooters were more like a toy. You know, it's like, it's convenient if you're going to spend a month at a marina and you need to zip along on nice sidewalk streets to go like to the, you know, whatever, to the store and stuff. Like, you know, that's a great way to move around. But if you have to buy one of those items that is going to be more versatile, I think the bike allows you to carry like much more stuff. It's easier to like lock it somewhere versus like carrying I mean, I guess you can lock your scooter, but so to us, like the
folding bikes were what we bought at the time. And, you know, we used them. We went on bike rides as much as we did just trying to go down to the hardware store, you know, and when we were at different places. But anywhere that was worth really visiting, like the islands and stuff in the Med, rented bikes right there on the marina. So, and by the way, like some of these places have hills. And if you're trying to take a folding bike with those itty bitty wheels up a hill, like I struggled.
Yeah, no, they're not designed for that.
And so then I was kind of wishing I had like a electrical assist bike, you know, in some cases. But even so, you can rent mountain bikes and stuff for not very expensive at all.
Yeah, it goes a little bit along the line of the laundry services.
Yeah.
Like if you have places that are going to be like you on an island, like all the places we went to, they were renting like mountain bikes, electric bikes. And then whenever there were hills, they were renting basically like scooters, little motorcycles. And so most of the time we ended up doing this.
Renting the motorcycles, you mean?
Yeah. When we wanted to travel around the island, you know, to be able, or when it was very hilly, that you understand if they rent that's there's a reason.
A lot of hills.
So you don't take your little bike. And then the bikes, like, it's not too bad, but it's still awkward to bring that down in your dinghy and then bring it out. And even if it's light,
it takes effort. It takes effort, and then pretty soon you end up just not doing it. Yeah. And it's not that we're lazy. We, you know, it's just we sort of like, we'll just do this or that.
And then you have to find a way where to store it. And we found a good way, but that's, you know, so now what we're thinking about is.
But let me just mention one thing before you go on, is the other thing is the folding bikes rust really quickly. So when we did passages, even if for a couple days, and then we would open up the cover we had for it for the bike, we'd have to clean it. every time. And so to maintain the rust off the bike and the gears and all of that was definitely way more than you would do on land. So that's something to keep in mind.
It was not too bad because it was inside the cockpit where we'll store them, and then they had a cover, and then we had oil. But
it was still, all I'm saying is it's still a lot more maintenance than.
Yeah, that's another thing,
Another thing to clean, yeah.
So now what we're thinking about is we might take one folding bikes, and the purpose of it will be like if one of us needs to go to the store, to the chandlery or something, like we can go do this, kind of like a little car on land, I guess. But we're not thinking of bringing two bikes or two electrical folding bikes. So when we're going to do outings, because then we'll find places where we can rent them, and that's what we'll do. Or we'll hike, we'll walk.
Yeah. So that's the kind of bike situation. And other toys, I mean, obviously the inflatable
stand-up paddleboard? The
stand-up paddleboard obviously is like you have to have. It's amazing for so many reasons, including the med mooring and, getting to, we actually would use that to just get to land instead of even dealing with the dinghy.
And we had one long one, and we will just kind of use it that way.
Both of us would sit on it. And we could even carry groceries on it too. So that was all fine. So I guess the tips for living on a boat is, to use the 80-20 rule. How would you describe the 80-20 rule?
Yeah, I mean, 80-20, or even some cases 19-10 and
90-10.
90-10. To really, basically, you're going to have to make a set of decisions for yourself along the way. And if you take each decision individually, it's so easy to just be like, oops.
To justify that you need more or more of things or whatever.
And I think you need to extract yourself and be like, okay, what's our guidelines? What's our operating rules that we're going to apply when we make selections? And that's true for options for the boat, and that's true for what we bring on board. So,
and I think what you mean by 80-10 rule is
80-10?
Or sorry, would you say
80-20?
80-20
or 90-10?
Or 90-10 is that you have to think in terms of the most of the time that you spend on the boat. So sometimes you think, but I'm going to be entertaining all these people all the time, or my family's going to come visit, or, I have to kind of plan for like this biggest case scenario and actually do the opposite. Yeah.
Like the dinghy we talked about.
Yeah.
It's like if 90% of the time that's going to be us.
Yeah.
And the 10% or even 20, but 10% of the time you need to do two trips.
Yeah.
Because
it's not a big deal.
You have to load stuff. It's just like, then simplify your life with a smaller, lighter dinghy, and then do 2 trips for that 10% of the time that's going to happen. So that's one example.
Yeah. The other one that's silly, and it sounds kind of camping-like, but honestly, it's so easy, is if you have a lot of people on the boat, they're typically either your family or they're other boaters. And so in the scenario where it's your other family, you can get disposable plates or cutlery. Like, you don't necessarily have to carry all that stuff. If it's other boaters, everybody kind of does potluck. Like it's sort of it's well understood that everybody brings something and that sort of thing. So it's okay to say, hey, can you bring a couple plates or whatever it is? Yeah. So it's not that big of a deal. Again, it totally depends on your style, but this would be completely acceptable and no one would bat an eye, So just kind of giving you the full range of options. Like you don't necessarily have to plan for 12 of everything when you're stocking up.
And the reality of like friends and family, it sounds good initially, and depending where you are, the logistics of
it's hard to get. Yeah.
Some people, it's hard. And if you are like, in an area that's closer, like, it's still not super easy to know in advance because they need to book their flights. They need to, know if they maybe spend the first night, on a hotel. There's a lot of questions. And yes, you'll eventually have friends, families, but it's not as much as what you think.
Based on, we're not super, like our kids aren't flying out every week to see us on the boat, because they have their own lives going on. I'm sure there are people that have friends who come a lot more than, we do. But I guess generally what we're saying is based on what we're observing and talking to other people is you start out thinking a lot more people are going to visit you than actually do. And so that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, because the planning for doing trips like this, and your planning are just hard.
Yeah.
They don't align.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we kind of have a rule is, we always ask ourselves, okay, is this a single purpose thing? Or can this have dual purposes? Mm-hmm. Now, there's some things I mentioned, like a really nice espresso machine. You're just going to have that because you like it, right? But in other instances, we always try to think about, okay, can this be used for something else too? And then that helps us kind of justify having it on the boat. So I think that's something to just consider as well. Mm-hmm. Any other advice you would have?
Yeah, some keywords. We got the idea from Outremer, like when they designed the inside and the outside, they go through this study and they come up with like 3 keywords. And so we said, well, what about we apply that same philosophy on how we want to equip our boat? So what are 3 keywords we came up with?
Simple, light, and badass, I think, were the 3 words.
No, we combined simple and light to lean.
Oh, we did? Okay. Yeah.
So that's lean, badass. What was the third one?
I don't know, but the point is we use the 2 words simple and light or lean to kind of, for us, keep top of mind for us to make sure that we knew kind of, does it pass this little litmus test? So I think that...
Did we forget the third one now?
Well, I don't know why we... Now he's got to look it up.
I have to check my notes. But I think the reason is if you kind of establish these, then it becomes like, it's
a guiding principle for how you think about, what you want to do and how you want to spend.
So when you're on the fence, you're like, well, let's go back to like 80-20 rule. Let's go back to like, simple double usage or keywords.
But what happened last year is one of our big things was safety. And we kind of put everything under this safety lens, this little safety litmus test. Mm. And the problem was we ended up like everything started being about safety. So we ended up putting way more stuff on the boat because we could justify it to ourselves that it helps support the safety objective. So anyway, I mean, I think just sort of setting some guiding principles for yourself, I think that's the point of the exercise, is to just come up with some things that keep you generally honest.
Yeah.
And just, I think, like I said before, remember to, this is an adventure and you're going to experience different places. You're going to have, nice memories. You're certainly going to have pictures and everything, but it's nice to have little souvenirs that you can have on your boat that remind you of all the places you've been. So you can't really do that if your boat's really full. So give yourself space to kind of buy things along the way.
Yeah. And I think, it's an adventure what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have everything, it just goes under the umbrella if it's part of the adventure. Those are the memories you're going to keep. Yeah. And so it's okay to not have everything. That's the way we're looking at it at hand.
Yeah.
And, so.
And the problem is, you buy these boats and, there's some of these boats have a lot of storage and you feel the desire to fill them up because it's there. And, you don't necessarily need to do that either. Or
you're listening to a lot of advice from different people and you're like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we got sucked into that.
If you don't apply your own filter, your own rules, then quickly you can
just
say,
stuff the boat.
Sure, let's do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you have a heavy boat, which, is sort of back to what we're trying to solve for.
Which you're going to carry 100% of the time. And I think regardless of buying a performance boat or buying kind of more of a blue water cruising heavy
catamaran,
catamaran or monohull, it's still every kilogram, every pound is going to add up. And then it's going to take space. So it's going to be less storage, a bit more headache every time you need to move something. So I guess it goes back to, I've never read the book, but it's kind of like the Marie Kondo type thing, Does
it bring you joy? Yeah.
Does it bring you joy? And the less stuff you have, the more clarity or the more space in your head you're going to have. So I think that's maybe something also to think about.
Yeah, that is true. Good. Well, we hope you enjoy this episode.
I found the third one.
Oh, what was the third one?
So lean, badass, modern.
Modern. Oh.
Yeah. So those are the 1 to 3 words we're kind of that helps us to kind of
guide
our decisions.
Yeah. And so we're evolving, as we're kind of trying to figure out even, what kind of artwork we want on the boat and what we want the boat to feel like and that sort of thing. But we're still really striving for the lean aspect of simple and light. So good. Well, thank you. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have any comments or questions, please shoot those over to us at sailingawen@gmail.com. Fair winds for now.
Bon vent.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, like, or share with another Covert Castaway. Fair winds for now.